Hi everybody, this is Ajay Benway. Sorry I didn't make any videos more often, I was a little busy, and also I started researching about my genes and where a lot of my ancestors came from. Let's start a look about the long lines of the Benways and the Benwells. As I look at it, when I look at the histories, let's first take a look about the Anglo-Saxons. What I discovered, they were the most interesting nomadic tribes settled from northern Germany to Britain to Scotland to Ireland and to France. As I research more, take a look about the names long before the Benway. The surname of Benway was a locational name from a place so called in Northumberland. The name was derived from the Old English BIONNAN WALLE, literally meaning the dweller by the Roman wall. The resident nearby. Place names as family names come from many different centuries and many different countries. They come from places where the original holder of the name lived or had once lived. They indicate the precise locality in whatever way made most sense to other people at the time. In fact, very often this kind of name was given to people by the contemporaries, sometimes as nicknames, which just stuck. For example, if people were living in a foreign country, others often called them by the name of their country of origin. Or if they were living in an area of their own country populated by others of a different ethnic origin, they may have been called a name which indicated that if people, whether in their own country or not, were living in a different county, city, town or village than the one from which they came, or were thought to have come, they have often been called by a name to indicate the real name or supposed place of origin. And even within a small village or country, parish, the name of a farm where they lived, or of a hill or river or other landmark near their home has often been used to distinguish one person from another, especially when personal names such as saints' names were very common and weren't enough to clearly identify one individual. Most of the European surnames were formed in the 13th and 14th centuries. The process had started somewhat earlier and had continued in small places into the 19th century. But the norm is that in the 10th and the 11th centuries, people did not have surnames, whereas by the 15th century, most of the population had acquired a second name. Early records of the name mention Bynnewalle without surname, who was documented in the year 1050 in Northumberland. Benewell without surname was recorded in the year 1242, and William Benwell of Yorkshire was listed in the Yorkshire Poll Tax of 1379. The associated coat of arms are recorded in Sir Bernard Burkes, generally Armory, Ulster King of Arms, in 1884, registered in Oxford and London, granted in the year 1765. As for Yorkshire and London, I have those two of the biggest gene pools in one of the genetic communities on my map. And as for Ulster King of Arms, I will speak for it later on, which is also believed to be one of my big gene pools on Northern Ireland. I will get to that later on. So right now, also my biggest gene pool was, it turns out that the Benwell was originated from the south of Northumberland. It originated from the area where the biggest genetic spot is. Newcastle, Tan. It might take a while. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Newcastle, Newcastle, Teen and Ware, which is used to be south of Northumberland until later on has been separated from the rest of that county, at around 1400. Oh, Newcastle upon Tyne. Alright, is it Tyne or Tyne? It's kind of like a weird pronounce. Anyway, that was the very first spot that the Benwell came from. But not just that, it's also found a lot of Benwell surnames also in Cumberland and also a county next to it, where also I have those big genetic spots over that on that area too. It's pretty amazing about that. And also next up, Scotland. I found out that the most big genetic spots I have are across the lowland Scotland and the northwest of Ireland. That's where the big genetic spot is, over at Belfast. That explains about the Ulster King of Arms, but it was like much later on. As I looked through about it, there were many Anglo-Saxon kingdoms all over England, especially extended from the Middle England all the way to the southeast of Scotland. That's where also I have a big genetic spot on it too. It's called, well, the city in it is Edinburgh, and then settled towards west into Glasgow. Wait. The whole nomadic thing, I started researching more. Later on, like from 1890 to over 900, when I look up about the history, started with the West Saxon kings, started moving upward to Mercia, to York, and then going up to Northumberland. That is way before the developing of the surname Benwell, and then going up to Scotland too. And another thing, most of the Anglo-Saxon population started migrating up to lowland Scotland because of the invasion of the Normans. The half of that population started settling all over lowland Scotland. That explains there's like a little less Gaelic than the Germanic. But at least the Anglo-Saxons started slowly mingled with the Gaelic tribes, and which known as the Picts, the Scots, and also believed to be the Britons. So the surname of the Benwell started continuing passed on, and then started settling into Northern Ireland, which they might, yeah, definitely mingled with the Irish, because I'm 3% Irish, turns out. So, I have also Irish, many Scots, and also definitely have English in me. But the biggest gap that is in between is a mystery. Like, how did Benwell became the Benway? All I found out is the Benway came from Benoit, supposedly B-N-O-I-T, supposedly Old French in the northern France. And then it hit me, because many foreign ethnic groups started settling in Ireland, only like over 100 families. They were started out as Irish brigades, started fighting against the English, which supposedly English, since it's been taken over by the Anglo-Normans. They've been settling for like few generations, until started moving out to Canada along with the French settlers. In the 1600s, the Irish of France were used and sent to colonize the St. Lawrence Valley, which is also my big genetic communities were there too. They were the first Irish Canadians since the days of these early colonizers. The Irish have always held a strong presence in Canadian societies. Today, there are approximately 5 million Irish Canadians, which makes up about 15% of the populations of Canada. But you also got to remember, there's also more than 40% of the modern French-speaking Quebecers also have the Irish ancestors too. Since the founding of Montreal in 1642, there has been a strong Irish presence in the city. There were 3 stages of immigration. The first wave, 1607 to 1776. The desirable wave, second wave, 1776 to 1890. And the undesirable wave, 1890 to 1920. The majority of the Irish population in Montreal arrived during either the first or second waves of immigration, while many Irish came the third and later fourth waves of immigration. The early waves of Irish immigrants were those who truly began to form the identity of the Irish peoples in living Montreal. And as for New France and Montreal, at the beginning of the 18th century, which is the early 1700s, there were around 100 Irish families living in New France, while they were not the majority. Many, or not all, of the families were able to assimilate into French Canadian society and culture. Now let me stop there. It makes sense, because since a whole lot of French Canadians still sustain so much Old French, rather than New French languages, well, modern French languages, back in the old days, they didn't even write or read themselves. Only the high officials started giving out the names for the pronounce. As for the Benewell, probably started out in northern France during that times where a whole lot of Irish families were settling there. I think the Benwell, with the 2-letter L's at the end of it, make it like a very different pronounce for the Old French. You know the name Caillou from the series? The name Caillou has two L's in it, and it started making pronounced E or E. So my theory is the Benwell must have been pronounced differently through Old French, Benway or Benway, and must have been, and also you can make it changeable from E to A to make it almost sound like Benoit, Benoit, and then many generations later, before even settling through St. Lawrence River to Montreal, it must have been make it pronounced similarly to the Old French Benoit, which is B-N-O-I-T. They didn't have any like spellings, writings, or reading except for the officials until like later in the 19th century, or probably a lot earlier than that. So they must have been like have confusions. Probably some of them, Benway or Benoit, started split into two kinds of families. One, they started getting into more French Canadian identity. They must have adopted the spelling B-E-N-O-I-T. And as for the Benway, B-E-N-W-A-Y, they must have like a different spelling too. So, started out as the Anglo-Scots-Irish families started converting themselves into a Latin-French culture ever since, well, since they were Roman Catholic originally. They started to speak French, and many of them got like I would say changing from, also can be interchanging too. It would make totally sense. With a very little degree of difficulty, many of these Irish families migrated to Montreal. Because of its geographic placement, downstream from St. Lawrence River, Montreal very quickly became one of the biggest centers of trade in New France. Just like many other Irish families, that explains why they got the Northern European surname be francized or gallicized to make it similar to the other French surnames, to make it sound alike. Yes, from, like I said, started from northern Germany, once called Old Saxony, to southern England, migrated up to northeast of England, such as Northumberland and Newcastle upon Tyne, and then migrated up to lowland Scotland, where Edinburgh and Glasgow, and moving into Belfast, Northern Ireland, and then started migrating down to northern France, and then ship off all the way to Quebec and migrated down to Montreal. And the family started splitting up after the French and Indian War. The Benwell family started migrating down to Vermont. But what I discovered that my great-great-great-grandfather migrated down from Montreal to Massachusetts during the mid-1800s or late 1800s. and also that's how my grandfather's grandfather was named Alfred Alfred F. Benway, who was a police officer in Hudson, and also Francis Benway as a rodeo cowboy. And then my grandfather was a lieutenant for the Army. And also my father, who is also a hardworking citizen and also an Army veteran. And here's me, just making YouTube videos. And also a hard worker too, sort of. So there you have it. A whole lot of amazing discoveries I have. And also hopefully you could understand what I'm saying. So a Benwell cannot change to Benway without going through the old French language ever since migrating. It's pretty awesome when you discover things. I'm gonna leave the many genetic community charts that I have, what I told you. I have the biggest genetic communities in St. Lawrence River and Northumberland, Newcastle upon Tyne, Cumberland in the other county, across lowland Scotland and northeast of Northern Ireland. That's all I can say about where my genetic communities come from. Also from northern Germany and the deep south of Denmark, which the Anglos came from. Thank you for watching. God bless.